I'm going to look at the kind of question module now. I thought one is going to put this sort of center screen and I can talk about it. So the questions, we have two upvotes in the top two questions. First question for you, Phil, is I think it's a really great question, actually. I was having a look at this in advance. What are the steps that a new company should take to build credibility when they have no reviews yet to put on their website, or they haven't got any reviews on GMB or Yelp? How would you kind of handle that if you were dealing with a customer in that situation?
That's where it would be. It really depends on the industry. I mean, if you are in a high volume industry, there's not much necessarily you need to do to get reviews. You need to maintain a body temperature somewhere in the 90s and serve a customer, and the customer needs to go into your business and come out alive. And as long as that happens, you've got a review. So certainly for higher volume, maybe lower transaction value businesses, that's all you need to do. You basically don't, as long as you don't screw up, you will get some reviews. So a lot of, I guess this is a difficult time and kind of an outlier, but anyone in the restaurant or tourism industries, if you're in kind of a fun industry as opposed to like the legal industry or the medical industry, if you have like an escape room, for example, or a bed and breakfast, people are not too shy about writing a review. And so, at most, all you may need to do is ask. But generally, as long as your doors are open and you're seeing customers and nothing horrible happened to them, there's not much else you necessarily need to do. Now, it's a different ball game, of course, if you are in a sort of a less sexy industry where maybe people are shy about writing a review. So, if you're in the pest control space, if you are a bankruptcy attorney, if you're a therapist, it's a little bit tougher. So, I mean, maybe the easiest way into this is if we talk about, and maybe this is where the person who asked that very good question could just could specify what industry we're talking about, because that really, for me at least, for my clients, that really sways what action item number one is. It just depends on the industry.
So I guess the first protocol would always be just as long as the service you're providing is up and running and you think it's doing a good enough job that people are having a good experience, right, then start asking for reviews and start kicking off that process as kind of early as possible. I mean, I know some of the research that we do shows that you need to have kind of certain quantity of reviews before people start to trust the star rate, and they start to kind of trust the actual kind of quality of those reviews. People think, if you've got less than 10 reviews, those reviews could quite easily be gamed or be, less kind of bona fide reviews. But if you've got 100, it's much harder to fake 100 reviews. People can start to understand, understand and trust the sort of sentiment and the sort of star rating. I was thinking, what about though in other ways? I guess there are lots of kind of accreditations that people can lean on, can't they, in terms of establishing authority and credibility that are not necessarily in the review game. If reviews take a while to ramp up, particularly in those less sort of sexy industries or lower footfall industries where you're maybe serving one or two clients over a quarter, what other kind of opportunities do you think there are to establish credibility and authority?
That's where it really, really depends on the industry. I mean, in general, obviously, one very early step you need to do is get listed on the sites where people can write a review. And those are not always the same as just kind of the standard issue sites we care about when working on citations. I mean, a lot of these otherwise good citation sources are not review sites, and some great review sites nobody's heard of, except maybe people in the industry who sort of know what the directory, the relevant niche directories are. So obviously that's an early step you have to bang out, at least, get kind of listed on the main review sites everybody's heard of, and then the sites within your niche. I mean, if you're going from, I assume the business in question has a couple of customers. So my first impulse, having thought about the question for all of about 90 seconds now, would be treat those first couple customers like royalty. you probably want to make, even well after you've rendered the service or they bought the product or whatever, stay in touch with them. See, did the product break? Did the service, did the work you did as part of the service hold up over time? I think the business owner needs to resist the temptation to ask for a review right after money has changed hands. Because on the one hand, that is, for some people, that's a honeymoon period, because the customer or client or patient has a smile on his or her face and is probably willing to write a review because the work has just been completed and everybody feels good. On the other hand, the jury is still out by that time, because the customer or client or patient may not know how the service really turned out. So for me, as the sort of the abstract business owner in the question, I'd want the kind of review that encourages other people who read the review eventually to write one. So either other customers or would-be customers, because I mean every business is either in an upward spiral or a downward spiral with reviews. If all the reviews seem negative, other people are more likely to pile on and leave a negative review. If the reviews are generally positive and they're detailed, people pick the business, new customers, clients, patients, pick the business because of the strength of the reviews. And those people are more predisposed to write them. So my first goal then, if I were just starting pretty much from square one, is get the first couple of customers to be just rabid fans of my work, and have them write a review not once money has changed hands, but after they've battle tested the service or the product and really put it through its paces. So in other words, get them to go into great detail in the review, rather than tell them, oh, it'll take you 3 minutes to dash off a review on Google, just a few quick words of feedback. That's good. I mean, that's good insofar as you get a review on the board, but it doesn't really encourage any onlookers to write a review. And it doesn't, again, get you the kind of customers who are predisposed themselves to writing you a review. So my first, I guess another way of looking at it is I would try to have the first couple of reviews set an example for maybe all that follow.
Yeah, it's a good point. It kind of sort of sets the tone, isn't it? And I think
exactly
responding to those reviews is also kind of crucial as well. And the way that you respond is, like you said, is going to set the tone, establish that you're a company that listens, establish the type of organization you are and the way that you respond to those reviews. And almost a response to a review is almost as good as another review, particularly in the kind of early days, because it's you're trying to establish trust. You're trying to establish that you're a trustworthy business, and that can either come out of the mouth of your customer, or it can come out of the mouth of the business owner in response to their customer and just the way that they handle that sort of situation.
It's for sure. I mean, I think if business owners put 10% of the thought into their responses that their best customers put into the most thoughtful reviews, more people would be receptive to writing a review, because like, hey, I know that the business owner will see it and take it seriously, as opposed to the typical protocol I guess a lot of business owners take, which is just squeaky wheel gets the grease. They don't respond to reviews that are nice. They only respond to the negative reviews, and that's not good.
Yeah, I think take the time. If someone has taken the time to write a review for you, take the time to write a decent response that acknowledges what they've done, and try and embellish it a little bit. We take a lot of time to do that ourselves. Seriously, both you and I started our business at a similar time, and it took a long time. Reviews weren't really that big when we were sort of starting out. It wasn't so that it didn't have the impact and the scale. There wasn't the sites, and we certainly weren't doing webinars around reputation management sort of back in 2009. But another thing I think is pretty interesting is establishing your own credibility through good content. Writing about what you know about. So whatever service area you're in, if you're wanting someone to come to your website and they want proof that you're a good business. Obviously, if you've got that social proof and reviews, you would represent that on your website. But if you haven't got that up, what other kind of opportunities on landing pages or on the sites do you steer your customers to impart trust and to build up authority in whatever their area of function is?
Off the top of my head, FAQs. I mean, Google, just in terms of SEO, Google eats up FAQs. I mean, because so much of the search results now are formatted as FAQs. You know, you have the sort of the I forget what it's called, but you know, it's not position 0, but it's the structured snippets where I forget the nomenclature. I'm embarrassed to admit, but you know, you have sort of the never-ending list, the accordion of questions.
Yeah.
And so there's some SEO value to those, but of course there's value to your customers if they get to your site and on any given landing page, whether it's the home page or a page on a city or a state or a specific service or product you offer. If you address the topics on and the concerns on their mind, you know, that's a great time to. It's kind of a great backdoor way to get those pages potentially to rank for certain terms, and it's a great opportunity to wheel out reviews. You know, if there's a question along the lines of, you know, why do customers love local visibility system? You know, my company, then I have some reviews that answer the question maybe better than I can. It's a great time to drop in internal links to other pages and to weave those in. So yeah, I'm more and more over time. I've become a big fan of FAQs.
Okay.
So you know, that's kind of I would say the first arrow in my quiver.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Thanks, Phil. Let's go on to the kind of next question. So the next question that was voted up is: I work in healthcare. I guess it could be, you know, I guess the person probably works within a healthcare sort of business themselves. Which just jumped around on my screen. Is it related to HIPAA? How do you address HIPAA issues in online reviews? You know, as a healthcare provider, are we liable for HIPAA breaches by a reviewer?
Well, contrary to popular belief, I am not an attorney, so I cannot necessarily answer that question definitively. But my working understanding has always been that patients can say whatever they like in their reviews. They can get into all the gory details if they want, or they can be a little more elliptical. I think the only way that the doctor or other healthcare practitioner potentially gets into trouble is if he or she lets the cat out of the bag and responds to a review in such a way that violates the patient's privacy. So that's why a lot of times you'll see doctors and other people in the healthcare space respond to these great, thoughtful, very personable reviews by saying, "Thanks, Bob," or "Thanks, Mary," as the whole response to the review. It's not detailed. It doesn't address all the points. It doesn't even address all the concerns in the review. It's almost like the doctor, you're not even sure if the doctor knows who the reviewer is based on the review. And that's intentional because you don't want it. My understanding of the rules has been that for you not to violate HIPAA, you may not even be able to acknowledge that the patient was a patient. You just have to say, "Thank you for the review, dear sir, or dear madam." And so if you want to play it really safe, just have your response be very vanilla. You know, I guess the only other, so, you know, certainly don't acknowledge what type of treatment the person had. And even if the reviewer is making ridiculous, outlandish, untrue claims about your practice, don't necessarily take them to the mats in the response to the review. You can email, I guess you can contact them separately and dispute the whatever they smeared you with publicly, but you can't do it in the response to the review, because then you're saying what happened or did not happen in the course of that person's treatment that happened or did not happen. So basically, the less you say, the better in as far as your review response goes. The only other point I would add is that maybe to play it safe, don't copy and paste or embed a review that you think may violate HIPAA on your site. So if it's a Yelp review and the patient goes into however much detail he or she is comfortable with, that's fine. And the review as it is left on Yelp, for instance, probably doesn't violate HIPAA. But then I wouldn't embed or otherwise grab that review and stick it on my site, because then I'm propagating that info, and that might be, you may then run afoul of the HIPAA specifications.
That's an interesting thought, actually. Since it kind of dovetails with our new kind of sort of showcase review, so that actually, if someone involuntarily leaves a review on a third-party site, and even if they say you can use that review or have access to it, actually just by replicating on your own site, like I say, you're particularly exacerbating that kind of situation. You've got it in a different environment. You could fall foul of the rules, because the rules seem to be kind of grey. In some ways, they're kind of clear, but once you kind of go beyond the clear bits, it becomes a little bit more vague, like the reuse, the kind of reuse of reviews. It seems
exactly. So just one sidebar. Yeah, I mean, by the way I think of it is, by putting a review on your website, you're essentially signing off on it. You wouldn't put a review on your website that you thought was untrue or incriminating, or that you, for just some specific reason, didn't want on there. So you're implicitly signing off on the content of the review by sticking it on your site. So I probably wouldn't do that. And yeah, as you say, the guidelines, I think, are kind of in the style that Google likes to do, intentionally vague, so that the powers that be can use can apply a know it when I see it standard to what's good and what's bad.
When you're advising your customers in the medical space in terms of how they should handle reviews, and let's ignore tools and operation and tools and mechanical systems that might aid software examples, what actual kind of internal practice sort of approaches should they have, so that the people who are in charge of responding to reviews know exactly what they do? Do they really lock it down so that it's only like one specific person who really understands the rules integrally is the person who's involved? How do you tend to sort of manage it with them?
Well, as with so many things, my answer is it depends. This is my general approach is true for my medical clients and for all the clients of all other stripes I work with. And it's a wide range of industries. And I find what works well in one tends to work well in the other. My general approach, I tend to think of it as two basic strategies. You either have the reviews czar, the one person who's in charge of reviews and in charge of, at least, if not the whole strategy, the person's usually in charge of either some combination of the whole strategy or asking everybody personally for a review. So the designated review person. That's one basic strategy. The other is kind of the boots on the ground strategy, which is more applicable if you are a multi-location business or practice or firm or other organization, and you have a manager or a kind of a branch owner or a franchisee at each place. Then the kind of the decentralized approach might work better for you. I tend not to do that, partly just because I tend to work more with smaller businesses, mostly as a matter of preference. So I tend to steer people more toward the centralized approach to encouraging reviews, just because if you don't have a designated review person, I mean, it's kind of like in baseball when the ball is coming down between left field and center field and shortstop, and everybody thinks each player thinks the other player has the ball, and nobody catches the ball, and they all clunk heads and fall down, and the opposing team scores a run. That's kind of what it's like when nobody is really in charge of the review strategy. So you do need long way of saying that I found you need somebody in the cockpit whose job it is to encourage reviews. What I found works best is to start with the higher touch, more labor intensive approach of, find a software solution later once you have a basic system that works, by which I mean, you have a way to identify which customers, clients, patients are more or less happy. And if they're not happy, this is not what I would consider review gating. Not that that is necessarily such a terrible thing, but you have a way to triage people and determine whether or not it is time to ask them for a review. I mean, one thing you need to determine is just whether the service has been completed. So there's more triage than you would think. Has the service been completed? Is the person more or less happy, or are there outstanding issues? So you need somebody at least to figure out whom to contact. Then the question is, who keeps track of your results? You do need some way to keep track of. I sent over the course of 2 months 100 emails. And here's how many people wrote a review, and here's where they wrote a review. So you need a designated review person to do that. So my general approach, again, a lot of this just depends on the specifics of the client's situation and his or her industry, what they've tried and how well it's worked so far. And I mean, my general approach is if they already have a system that works, don't tinker with it too much. But if they're starting from scratch, then we may try more things than if there's already a system in place.
Okay, Phil, I'm going to stop you there because half an hour done. We got a whole bunch of fresh questions coming in. So
it's an open-ended question. There's a lot to say about it. I would love to take another crack at it later.
We could talk for a long time about that. So let's jump out. Another question. This is actually being posted by Colin. Hey there, Colin, who was with us a couple of weeks ago and now with us again. Colin's question, actually, which has now just jumped down the list. This is an update in real time, by the way. But anyway, we'll get to everything. What do you see as the main value to earning non-Google reviews, so reviews on other platforms?
It confirms the veracity of the Google reviews, assuming that's something assuming the Google reviews are not themselves totally bogus. The reviews on other sites, with the exception of Yelp, tend not to get filtered. So on other sites, you are somewhat more likely, when you ask for a review, to get a review rather than have it be filtered, even though Google doesn't filter reviews that much these days. The other benefit is, when there's a time like what we've seen with the COVID pandemic, where, Google is backed up for days or weeks on publishing new reviews, and a customer writes a review and it doesn't see the light of day, until Google gets some roughage in its system and gets unblocked and isn't backed up so badly, you need some reviews coming in. And so that's where I'm not aware that other non-Google sources of reviews have been backed up in the same way that Google has been. So if anything, they're kind of a backup. They're an auxiliary place to get reviews. And also, it looks weird if you just have if you have 250 reviews on Google and 0 reviews somewhere else. So, I mean, the diversification of reviews is pretty natural, unless it's the kind of business where you do not get any reviews spontaneously from people. And the only reviews you ever get are the ones you ask people for specifically. Then, maybe having a lopsided review profile where it's all Google and no reviews on the other sites, then maybe that wouldn't look weird to some customers, but it would to others. So that's another one of those kind of squishy topics where we could have a whole webinar just about why you should diversify your reviews and go beyond Google. But the point is there are a lot of reasons.
There was an interesting sort of finding from our latest consumer review study, which we've done for many, many years. But this year, one of the questions they asked is, when you read reviews, what do you do next? What action do you take? And typically, in previous years, people have said, I make contact with the company somehow. I visit the website or I kind of call them. This year, the response was, I look for more reviews. So when you kind of meant to enter the veracity, the kind of the truth, the trustworthiness of the reviews, what people are doing now, because of the kind of advent of fake reviews and that becoming more kind of widely appreciated, people are reading reviews on Google or somewhere and they're going, okay, that gives me like one view of this business. Let me corroborate that by going over here and trying to look for more reviews. And if there's no place to corroborate, then you're basically reducing the likelihood that someone is going to trust that one view of the world, that one view of you. So if you're getting reviews on 3 or 4 or even 2 sites, probably gives you a much better chance of imparting that kind of level of trust that the customer is going to need to make contact with you, to kind of sort of do business with you.
Right.
Yeah, and typically we when we sort of advise customers, say, look, when you're looking at where to get reviews, places like Google and Facebook, vast volume, huge opportunity to get customers at scale. But there also like to be smaller sites where they've got incredibly loyal audiences or incredibly valuable audiences, like let's say Trustpilot if you're a hotel or a restaurant, or it could be one of the medical sites like kind of Rate MDs or Vitals if you're in the kind of medical space. Those sites, they may not have the volume, but they've got either very tight-knit audiences who love those sites and will go to any business that's recommended on them, or they're people looking for more information like about medical procedures or practices, and therefore very high intent, high purchase sort of opportunity.
Right. I mean the value is endless of just having more than one leg on the bar stool. So not just Google, not just Trustpilot, or not just Facebook, but hitting your review strategy from a few different angles. And some of that is natural. I mean, some people just will not write a review on Google no matter what you do, and those people by default may choose another site, and that's fine. So yeah, it's not only important to diversify, but it's also pretty easy. And there's no such thing as too early. I mean, let's just say hypothetically you were not able to get your Google review strategy off the ground. You've wanted to get up to 10 Google reviews, but for one reason or another, you found it very hard to get people to write a Google review. Well, have them write a review somewhere else while you are nibbling away on Google reviews, and eventually you'll get the Google reviews you want. But in the meantime, you want to cultivate the other smaller sources of visibility, so that once you have the Google reviews, they don't look like weird outliers, but rather just part of a kind of a wider tapestry.
Yeah. What is the latest from Google in terms of when they're going to be pushing more reviews out again? Have you got any fresh insight on that?
I guess it depends on your definition of an insight. I have seen a trickle of Google reviews go up in the past couple of weeks, for various clients and other people whose reviews I've spot checked. So they are going up. Now these seem to be fewer and farther between. I mean, the initial issue with Google reviews was, once word got out that they were not, that Google was backed up and the reviews weren't going up, I think most business owners who were not necessarily good at asking for reviews to begin with just stopped asking altogether. So here, really, the question is, will business owners get the memo and start asking people for reviews again? Because if they don't, the chances that business owners are going to throw customers and clients and patients at Google at Google reviews only for those reviews not to see the light of day, that's a tough ask. So Google really has to make sure that business owners get the memo that either Google reviews are working as well as or badly, depending on your outlook, as they did before, or it's a work in progress, and 80% of reviews are going up and Google's still dealing with 20% bugs. Whatever the case may be, Google just needs to communicate it to business owners, and they didn't really do that when last month when reviews stopped going up. But since then, in the past couple of weeks, I've seen some new reviews go up, and I don't know.
Is that for certain industries? Have you seen?
I haven't been able to tell.
It's
been just a mishmash of different industries.
Okay.
So yeah, I haven't been able to discern any rhyme or reason. But no, reviews are going up, and it's not just 1 stars, and it's not just 5 stars. And so again, I can't tell what kind of reviews Google's letting through. And for all I know, those reviews maybe were posted a month ago, and they're they show up as more recent just because Google approved them more recently. I have no way of knowing, but yeah, once again, it's just a question of communication on Google's part. Because if they make it known to business owners and customers that writing reviews is not a fool's errand, then we'll start seeing more reviews go up. But the point is, they're there, but nobody seems to know exactly what the deal is.
So the reviews have been captured, that is sitting essentially in a pipeline to be reviewed and be pushed through. But actually we had Jason on last week who was saying that obviously Google's just had to sort of, a lot of its staff are not able to, that had in outsourced companies that managed a lot of its kind of processing of reviews and kind of content review and sort of Q&A, etc., and responses just aren't there to do it. So they're understaffed, and therefore they're just not able to get through the volume. He also said it might be prioritizing reviews for medical industries to ensure that people are getting the right information to when they kind of critically need it for kind of sort of medical support. But it's interesting. I've also heard that other industries are seeing a drip feed of reviews coming in as well. Okay, let's have a look at other questions we've got. There's actually a question here which has had the most votes but isn't anything related to reviews. It says, it's about Bing and Bing Webmaster Tools or Bing Places. Do you see any value of optimizing or spending much time optimizing specifically for Bing, either organically or in Bing Places itself?
Not really. It's a good question. It's one I get all the time. I mean, I would use most of Bing, of course, just is determined by the same things that determine how well you rank in Google. So, or basically your organic SEO, AKA content and links and content. So most of it is the same. And of course, the maps component of Bing really depends on Yelp. If you have a Yelp page, you will be listed on Bing sooner or later, and you will have reviews on Bing. There used to be such a thing as Bing reviews until probably, 2011 or 2012, and then they were replaced by Yelp. And then so Yelp sourced all that data afterwards. So since then, I mean, it's good to have a Bing Places page, but that's about it. I think the only other upshot is maybe Bing can be your lab chimp if there is some kind of experiment you want to do with your website or with sort of your Bing Places page. And if it goes well, you get some insight that maybe you can transplant into Google. And if it doesn't go well, what's the big loss? It's Bing. So that's my tack. I basically don't pay it too much attention, but it has its place in the world. I guess probably if your demographic for your business is Microsoft employees who live in the Seattle area, then you probably want to have a pretty visible presence in Bing. But otherwise, I don't know that there's a lot of payoff.
Yeah.
No disrespect to Bing. I mean, that's more a comment on how dominant Google is.
It seems to what you mentioned around kind of Yelp reviews, which I guess kind of ties back into a kind of earlier question in terms of, I guess, the value of other kind of non-Google sites. I mean, Yelp itself, its audience, I mean, I don't know whether this audience is even growing or it's shrinking or it's just in a sort of stable mode, but they seem to be increasing their review syndication now, because obviously they syndicate to Apple Maps, they syndicate to Bing, I believe they syndicate to kind of DuckDuckGo as well, which has actually got an increasing kind of sort of market share. Feels to me that actually the almost the real value in Yelp reviews is those large syndication opportunities it has, which gives it a much larger audience that it has on its own site.
Yeah, I mean, it's one has to admire the fancy footwork on the part of Yelp. I would agree with that. It's not. It's more an empire than a company. I did an infographic a number of years ago about kind of which review sites and search engines, for that matter, are in Yelp's sphere of influence. I forgot the name of the blog post, but I did a fancy little graphic on that. I can maybe send you the link after the webinar. But yeah, I mean it's an interesting different tack from what Google has done. I mean, Google's reviews are not really syndicated anywhere. I mean, they live in Google. Now, of course, that means everybody who finds you in the local search results or searches for the name of your brand by name eventually sees your Google reviews, and not everybody will see your Yelp reviews. But yeah, Yelp has Yelp has its toes in many different waters, and yeah, so one Yelp review is not one Yelp review. It's a Yelp review and a Bing review and an Apple Maps review, and I think at one point they even syndicated some of their reviews to Yellow Pages, if I remember correctly. So there are a couple other sites where Yelp reviews pop up. So it's Yelp is not relevant to everybody's industry, and for some businesses, there's very little or nothing you can do to rustle up Yelp reviews. But insofar as some of your customers pay attention to it, you probably should too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go to another question. This one comes from Linda Budd. It says, I really need to set up a proper online review system for my business, but I don't know which one without it all costing a lot. And I'd also like the option of seeing the reviews before they go live and have the option of whether they should be posted or not. Is that a possibility? I guess if we chunk this question down, it's about she needs a review system and a tool. Do you see those two things as being one and the same, or do you kind of feel that actually the tools just kind of augment the system a business has?
It's a great compound question there. I would say you don't need it. I have a multi-part answer too. One, your review system does not have to include a tool. It can, maybe it should. Certainly, if you get a system down pat that works for you, and then it's you find it onerous and you have a hard time finding the time to do kind of the manual outreach, yeah, then look for ways to make it easier. I recommend attempting it in that order rather than signing up for a tool and hoping it is your sort of your silver bullet and then finding that it's not, and then having to go back to the drawing board to find a system that works. So what I would do is get the manual approach down, ask in person, and send an email and maybe even a follow-up email, so that because people aren't going to write you a review on the spot. Typically, you plant the seed of the idea in person or during the initial contact, and then you follow up. And then so the follow-up is a reminder rather than the first time you're asking somebody for a review. So I found that kind of that 1-2 punch works best, where the initial request is not the only one, but the email doesn't come out of the blue either. So
yeah.
You want kind of belt and suspenders, I guess. So I recommend that approach rather than looking for one tool to do it all for you, because then you potentially, as I said in one of my blog posts, you just automate failure, and it doesn't work for you. And that it may be a perfectly good tool, but you haven't used it the right way. So I would start with the low-tech, high-touch approach, get that to work, then look for ways to make it easier. But even then, once you get to that stage where you're just looking for a tool to do some of the legwork for you, I would look at a combination of them. Try out different types. I know BrightLocal offers one. I would try that and kind of compare that with other tools potentially, and see which one kind of drops into your existing system better. But I would think in terms of combination of solutions rather than in terms of one solution.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point in terms of, nothing works as well as asking in person. Even if they don't do the review at the time, just get them to buy into it. Because I was reading a bit of sort of simple psychology. Is people like to be seen to be acting consistently. Essentially, if you don't act consistently, it's almost a sort of sign of kind of madness. So if someone says, yeah, I'll write you a review face to face, and then you follow up with an email, they're much more likely to actually respond to the email or the message because they've already said they would. And this kind of desire to be seen as a kind of consistent, logical, sensible, sane person drives them to kind of follow through. So it's a great way of, don't purely rely on mass mail out technology to do the job. Get that kind of initial kind of buy-in request done in a sort of face-to-face, get people to kind of make that mental commitment to doing it, and then you'll see much better results with any kind of SMSs or emails or kind of really kind of follow-ups that you do in the end.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You want people to give you at least a tacit commitment. It's a little hard. They may still flake out on you, but it's a little harder for them to do that. And you also want to ask, you want to put at least 10% of the thoughtfulness into your request that you expect people to put into the review. So how can you expect them to write you a good review if you send out an email blast that is like, "Dear valued customer," and it's just completely generic, and you didn't put a whit of thought into how you ask people. So
sure. Yeah.
I would try to observe some proportionality between the thoughtfulness of the ask and the thoughtfulness of what you expect people to do.
Okay. Next question comes from Emily. Saying in review responses, have you got any kind of creative or interesting ways that a brand or a business can express their personality and through the way they respond to reviews, so that it's not just seen as a generic response? Actually, they're doing more to reinforce the personality of the brand.
The main thing is not to just have a wet towel over your responses. If you think, sometimes the wet towel has to be there because you, like in the case of HIPAA, as we discussed a few minutes ago, there are certain things for all intents and purposes you just can't say. And likewise, if maybe you're a therapist or you're an attorney, or you're just discussing something very very personal with people, that's probably not the time to inject your fun side and your personality. Vanilla is probably good in that scenario. Other than that, my first response would be know the rules. Are there certain things you cannot say or have to say? So as long as what you write is not either violating some regulation or some unspoken rule, I would say don't necessarily try to sound too buttoned down. Just maybe, I don't have hard and fast rules for this. It's more like, don't look at other people's how other businesses respond, because most of them do a really bad job. The surest way for none of your personality to come through in a response is to mimic how other businesses respond to their reviews. That's a very good way for the response to look generic and insincere and not very interesting or engaging. So that's one of the times where maybe I'm assuming you're not violating a rule, a written or unspoken rule by doing this. I would probably just leave off the filter. I wouldn't look at what kind of other businesses in your space, other competitors do, and how sort of sterile and uninteresting their responses are. Just kind of, I would take a shoot from the hip approach to responding to the reviews. I would still probably wait a day. In case you have, say, a 3-star or 4-star review where you're not just expressing your gratitude to the reviewer for the review, and you may quibble with them, and you may have some. Your initial reaction may not be happy and positive if you get a 3-star review. So you probably want to sleep on it before responding to that sort of review. Anything that requires thought, in other words, you probably want to sleep on. But once you've done that, I would just say whatever is on my mind. I would not sort of model it after what other businesses do. So that's probably that probably sounds very intuitive, but it's a lot of responding to reviews is intuitive. So yeah. I would trust your gut.
It is a great way of responding to reviews to get across your personality, because it's essentially it's a one-to-one conversation, but it's very public and everyone is seeing it. The way I tend to think of it is I often think of my response to the review, and we've got a good review profile. We do get bad reviews. It happens, we're not sort of perfect. I also, it's a great opportunity to show the kind of business we are, that we listen, that we care. and a real chance I'm always writing the response not for the reviewer, but for the watching public. You know, the people who are then going to come along, see a bad review, and then I'm kind of writing my review so that I'm showing the future people that I actually care, that I really kind of care that there's been a problem and I want to kind of sort of resolve it. So you almost kind of think you've got kind of two audiences. You've got the audience, you know, of the person you're responding to, but everyone else is watching your response and can learn a lot about the business that you are from the way that you tackle that response, be it positive or be it negative.
Yeah, I think that the rule you just described a minute ago of kind of assume everybody is watching. I think that overall that has to take precedence. I think that that's worth observing before it's time to inject a little bit of personality into the response. I mean, again, this is where I wish I had some hard and fast rules for responding to reviews, but unfortunately I don't. I would say, you know, make sure what you said is very useful for getting a response that in which you say the right things. And once you do that, then I guess it's time to inject a little bit of personality. So that's where I would. I'm just going in circles here. I mean, I think it's just such a there's such a know it when I see it aspect of what is an appropriate review response. I mean, yes, I would agree that you do want to assume that other customers are paying attention, and even some of your competitors are looking at your review response, and so you want to tailor it to that audience too, or at least keep them in mind. But in terms of making the response not just generic and bland, that's where I would I would put the blinders on and think only in terms of, you know, what would I say to this customer if it were just the two of us talking. So there are these two kinds of spheres, I guess, you have to balance in responding to reviews.
Ariel in the chat has asked a sort of follow-on question. It says, you know, any idea, or, you know, what do you recommend to try and get, you know, a customer to change their review if it's negative? How do you deal with, you know, your own clients when they've got that situation? What's the advice that you give to them?
It totally depends. I mean, my first thought is, you know, typically the client freaks out a little bit in getting a bad review because he or she thinks that it's the end of the world. I have a bad review. It's a black mark on my name. And my response usually is, how reasonable does the reviewer look? I mean, if the worst review you have is from a person who doesn't look like he or she has all oars in the water, then that's pretty good. It actually makes you, the business owner, look good if the only person who says something negative about your business seems a little off his or her rocker, or just plain unreasonable in some other respect. So in that case, you know, you're probably not going to get that person to change his or her mind. So I wouldn't even try. If the review is damning because it's credible and it's well written and it's reasonable, and you can actually kind of see the complaints in the review and they don't seem absurd, my goal then, and this is my advice to clients in that situation, is change the experience. I mean, if the review reflects that person's experience, for better or worse, even if the person is a little hard to please or otherwise unreasonable, you can't do everything the same and expect the person to change the review. So you have to get in touch with the person somehow and try to offset whatever happened. I mean, you can't go back in time, but you can maybe take another bite at the apple. You can say, hey, can we come to your house and redo the such and such thing we installed? Can we get, you know, maybe you don't say this publicly, but you may need to give them some pro bono services. I mean, it really depends on who the customer is and what it is you offer, and whether how much flexibility you have. But my advice would be, you have to change the experience somehow, or at least give that person some new experience So maybe the initial transaction they had with you was a 1-star experience for them, and there's nothing you can do about that. But if you follow that up with some experience for them that is 5 stars, then if you want to look at it this way, then you're up to 3 stars rather than 1 star. So at least that person can either edit the review or, in the case of Yelp, post an update. But I would say, yeah, you have to change something before you can expect them to change their review. Or you have to add something, give them some reason to revisit it, some reason that they would feel some combination of silly or dishonest to leave a negative review up of you. Because if they had a bad experience with you and then they have a good one, most people will feel a little bit of guilt if they just leave you with the 1-star review, even after you went above and beyond to make them happy again. So change the experience.
Yeah, I sometimes think, I mean, if you get a 1-star review and you've got no other reviews around it, obviously it stands out, and it's, that's the kind of frame of reference that, new customers are going to have. They're going to look at that review. If you've got, 20, 15, 20, 30 good reviews, then actually getting a negative review or a bad review can actually give more credibility to all those good reviews that you've got, particularly if the way you respond to it is really positive and attentive to the needs of the reviewer. Because there you're basically saying to everyone, hey, look, we're not perfect, right? Not perfect, but we're going to try our hardest to look after every single customer, and we listen. And then that person may end up changing the review, which is great. But at the same time, you've also managed to express your side of it, and you've given almost more credibility to all those great reviews because you've got a couple of bad ones sort of thrown into the mix. But another good phrase, and I think, and also Sherry's sort of shared something here, having people like your 5-star reviews can get them to be kind of boosted higher up in your kind of GMB sort of review list. But actually having an active system that gets you more reviews ends up pushing those 1 or 2-star reviews further down and down. So you've got a system that is delivering new reviews on a kind of weekly or monthly basis. Then the long-term impact of those negative reviews is going to reduce as better quality reviews appear at the top of the review feed, and those are the ones that get the eyeballs of potential customers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, negative reviews can help you in a variety of ways, especially if your response is classy, and especially if you can tell from if the reviewer changes his or her mind, and that's clear based on kind of the back and forth between the response, between the review and your response as the business owner, and then maybe the customer's updated review. If it's clear that the person changed his or her mind because you sort of you fixed whatever the situation was, then that looks really good to any onlookers. And yeah, to your point about burying the few clunkers with more fresh good reviews. That's good because then the negative review becomes an Easter egg almost, where the would-be customer is reading all the good reviews and then eventually gets down to a bad one that sticks out like a sore thumb, and then reads it and says, that wasn't that bad. And boy, the business owner handled that with grace and clearly, cared about whatever the issue was and fixed it. So it almost becomes a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, absolutely right, and it adds that kind of credibility, and it kind of gives it shows that the business is genuine, because no business is perfect 100% of the time. Phil, if you can hang on, we've got a couple more questions I'd like to get to. If that's all right. You okay with
Wonderful.
that? Yeah. First question is actually about Yelp. Why? What is Yelp's policy? Why does it hide certain reviews, and how does it handle its reviews, and what can business owners do to influence whether reviews are shown or not shown?
I don't know. I mean, Yelp's policies are so unreasonable. I like to think that, just as in every movie, there's a villain, and I guess in the local search movie, Yelp is the villain, rivaled only by Google. And so, there's a place in the world for a really tough review site, where not anybody can write a review, essentially, and that's what Yelp is. So the flip side of that is it's not important in every industry. There's some parts of the country, at least here in the U.S., where just nobody pays attention to Yelp. There's some industries where nobody pays attention to Yelp. But as we discussed earlier in the webinar, it does affect a lot of industries, whether they know it or not, whether they like it or not. And it has its tentacles in various search engines and directories. So if you have to deal with Yelp and then you're hamstrung by their regulations, their policies, it's tough to know where to begin. I mean,
is it mainly down to the credibility of the reviewer? Is that how they see it working?
Yeah. Well, I mean, all of that was ramp up to my saying that the Yelp strategy for my clients completely depends on the client. Where are they? What industry are they in? How are they doing for reviews in general? How are they doing on Yelp already? I mean, if they already have a little pile of good Yelp reviews, the pressure's off. Now, it's worth doing what you can to keep the numbers increasing over the months and over the years. But if you have 3 5-star Yelp reviews, that's not what I would call a bleeding at the neck emergency. You don't need to get more Yelp reviews right away. I did a post a few years ago about basically about that question. What can you do to get Yelp reviews without risking a public shaming? Because obviously, if you go to Craigslist and try to buy Yelp reviews and they catch you, you're in trouble. You're not supposed to ask customers for reviews, but Yelp doesn't really have a way to know whether you asked a customer for a review other than to see, is this person an active reviewer? I mean, Yelp's filter is not as sophisticated as it may seem. It pretty much looks at how many reviews has the Yelp reviewer written and over what period of time. And if it seems to be an active Yelp reviewer, the chances are extremely good that Yelp will let the review go through and not filter the review. If the person has written fewer than about 10 reviews, the jury's out, and Yelp may not yet trust that reviewer and let up his or her review. So it really, whether Yelp filters the review mostly depends on just how active the reviewer is. It's not really something the business owner can do much to control. About the only thing the business owner can do, rather than be in a certain industry or be in a certain part of the country, is, and this may not be practical for everybody, but to use the Find Friends feature in Yelp. And probably most people who are listening to this know what that is, but it's basically a way to go to Yelp and to look up specific customers, clients, patients by either their names or their email addresses. You can also sync it with your Facebook. You can sync Yelp with your Facebook account, and if those people are have been active on your have at least liked, I guess, your Facebook page, then you can see by way of Facebook sort of how many of your customers or clients or patients are active on Yelp. And then you can cleverly contact those people and either ask them for a Yelp review if you want to. I mean, technically that's against Yelp's policies, but they really don't have a way to know that you asked them for a Yelp review. Or you can just furtively ask them for a review with the knowledge that their preferred review site is Yelp. And so that's probably where if you ask them for a review and they say yes, that's probably where they're going to end up leaving you a review. That's about the only arrow in your quiver.
Okay.
For most businesses, other than just being in the right place and being in the right industry.
Yeah. Okay, I think we'll leave it there. I want to talk about the kind of the Yelp piece, and I guess Yelp's view of not wanting to kind of solicit reviews because they feel that creates a more of a kind of biased sort of view of a kind of organization. And one thing I noticed actually doing some research sort of recently is actually analyzing our own sort of review activity we do on BrightLocal. Is there about 4 sites that we build reviews on, and quite proud to kind of go out there and build them. And there's a couple of sites we don't, because actually they're kind of paid sites. And what's interesting, and it stacks up against other research we found, is that you're actually able to generate a much higher star rating when you proactively manage your reviews and proactively go and generate reviews, rather than leave just reviews out there in the wild to be written by customers in an unsolicited, sort of managed way. So I guess for any business owners, actually actively managing your reviews is going to lead to higher star ratings in sort of certain places. But I also think to counter Yelp's view of the world is that, well, just let people naturally leave reviews. I mean, the natural inclination is for people to talk more about bad experiences than good, because that's just the way the world works. So actually, if you just let people just leave reviews naturally, you're going to paint a worse picture of your business than is actually truthful, because more people are likely to share a negative experience than share a positive experience. So, right. I think there's a fundamental flaw in Yelp's view of the world, that just letting reviews happen naturally is going to create a real world picture. I think it creates an adversely negative picture, given that's the type of thing that people respond to more sort of vehemently and more sort of passionately.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I mean, the other error I think Yelp makes is that people know full well how to write a bad review if they want to. But the people who had a good experience don't necessarily know that they may not even be in the habit of writing reviews. So what's wrong with sending them a little bit of a prod? And they know, even if you ask a customer who seems happy, that person may end up leaving you a 3 or a 4-star review. So just asking for people doesn't ensure that you get a certain star rating. It just means you asked them, and the rest is up to them. And so, Yelp's logic is rather like Swiss cheese, and it's just full of holes, and it's not practical. And I think for the most part, it's not worth observing. I think common sense has to prevail here.
Okay, brilliant, Phil. We're going to leave it there. Thank you very much. You've overrun. Phil, thank you so much for your time and your expertise today. I really appreciated it.